party thing.
Hello, hello. If you are joining us, we are going to get started here momentarily. Let us know that you are here with us by saying hi in the comments. And the good news is I think Tim can now see that you are here too. This is called progress, friends. You start and you don't always know what you're doing, and then as you move along, you learn some things. So let us know as you arrive that you are here. Good morning, Kevin. Good to see you. Good morning, Susan. Good to see you. Good morning, Steve. Good morning, Marie. Good to have you with us. Tim, are you able to see? Good morning, Karen. Good morning,
Yes,
Gerald.
yes.
Good
I'm
morning,
able
Tricia
to see
Scott.
that it's on the screen. It's my I don't have glasses strong enough to be able to read the screen, but yeah, I can see.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Does that help, Tim?
Oh yeah, thanks. Thanks for putting it in large print.
Oh, folks, we're just going to start by saying technology is so fun. We are glad that you are here with us this morning, and where we want to begin, and I'm going to hand this over to Tim. We'll have a conversation, but before we even get into any of this morning, good morning, Jim. Good to have you with us. Tim, you are echoing. Thanks, Susan, for letting us know. Let me see here. Um, Tim, could you pull your mic just a little bit back um, and see if that might help?
Is it better? Somebody will tell us, right?
Good morning, Mimi. Yeah, somebody either send me a text message or let us know in the comments if Tim is still echoing. You might need to say something, Tim, if you're.
Yeah, if I'm not saying anything, I'm not echoing, am I?
Oh goodness, we'll continue to monitor that. Okay, a little bit better. Okay, we
Well,
are
I'll stay back from the microphone. Maybe that'll help.
okay. I'm gonna bring this down a little as well. Maybe that will help. Tim sounds good now. All right, thanks for your help with that, folks. I want to begin by saying something that may sound silly, but I think it's important for us to say so that you aren't interpreting what we are doing here today in this way. Um, you know that Tim and I are not doctors. Well, we have a doctor's degree, but we are not medical doctors, and we are not lawyers. What we want to do here with you today is not try and play the doctor or play the lawyer. We're not going to do that, but to help you interpret what the conference has handed out and answer some of the questions that have been there to the best of our ability. So this is not legal advice. This is not medical advice. This is not the director of health for the state of Ohio. This is us sharing what we know with you. Now, the more important thing that we want to start with is to remind you that these guidelines were really put in place so that as we think about it and where we want to help you focus, that we can continue loving God and loving our neighbors. And this is a time that as leaders, our life and our preferences, where we need to focus is on making sure that we are doing everything that we possibly can to keep our neighbors safe, to keep the people around us healthy, and to love people, because that's what it means to love. I got us started. Tim, you jump in and say something
I,
profound.
how, how can I say that any better? I mean, it's all about who we are as followers of Jesus. It's all about how we love people. And the question is, in the midst of a pandemic, with these guidelines, how do we best love one another in a way that shows a witness to the rest of the world. We have an opportunity to model in ways that we've not had opportunity in the past. And this gives us a way. And so hopefully with some of the conversation we have today, we can continue to go back to say, this is how we will love one another in the midst of this pandemic.
Yeah. So that includes you. You're one of God's beloved. And so it also means taking care of you. And so we are grateful for everything that you have already done these past 6-8 weeks. How long has it been? Um, I Time seems to be a weird thing in this season right now for me, and I know for many of us. Um, but I need you to hear that you're God's beloved, because sometimes in leadership we pour everything out to others and we forget to look in the mirror and receive that blessing from God. So hold on to that and be reminded of that. And I hope you're being reminded of that daily. And that was just another another opportunity to hear it today.
So Sarah, I'm going to interrupt you and just say we're doing this Facebook Live because we love and care for you.
Absolutely.
That is no other reason to do this other than our care for you, and for you to be the leader for this point in time in history. Sounds dramatic, but this is where I've written it and I believe it. You've been created for this time. You may not feel that way, you may not think of it that way, but you are alive and you're a leader, and specifically a follower of Jesus giving leadership at this point in time in history. Let's take advantage of that by being who God created us to be.
Yeah. Well said. So I'm pausing because the hard part about this, folks, is we've got a long road ahead. we're looking at 12 to 18 months. That's what it's going to take for us to get to phase 3. That's what we're hearing, 12 to 18 months. Now you might say, well, when does that 12 to 18 months, when did that start? Some are saying it started in January, some are saying it started in March, some are just starting it. So, as I was saying, time's a funny thing. Things are going to continue to change and evolve. And what we know today and what we know in 2 weeks are likely going to be different. And as much as my human nature is not to live on a 2-week window, in terms of planning and in terms of thinking about what is happening with this virus, that's what we're being invited to do. Because decisions are being made, as best we can tell, at the state level on a 2-week basis. And that's what we're following within these guidelines. Jump in here, Tim.
Well, the only thing I would add, Sarah, is the virus doesn't know a calendar.
Yeah.
And the virus doesn't know the United Methodist Church and how much we want to gather.
Right.
The only thing the virus knows is a vaccine. Yeah. And how we respond before that vaccine. It's called flattening the curve. It's called caring for your neighbor. It's called wearing a mask. It's called social distancing. That's all the vaccine knows, or the virus knows. So that's really the way we have to think about this. And I think the way that helps me is that if I'm loving my neighbor the best way I can love my neighbor right now, I'm going to do the things that are best for my neighbor. Right. So that would be the only thing I would add.
And how I've come to frame that in my mind is that means I'm thinking about it in terms of 2 weeks at a time.
2 weeks at a time.
Well, I'm keeping my world firmly planted in this moment, but recognizing that's as far out as I can go. Anything else that we want to say before we jump into some questions?
I don't. I just think if we can start answering some questions or responding to some questions, that may be a place where we can add any other comment that might need to be.
Okay. So we've got a list of questions that some of you submitted in advance. You are more than welcome to add a question in the comments. We will do our best to get to them. If you are watching this on a watch party, I know Tim has shared it. I don't know if anybody else has shared it. We cannot see those questions as we are live. So jump over to the Transforming Mission Facebook page and drop the question there if you have a question right now. We are going to do our best to get through all of the questions. I can't promise that we're going to make it through all of the questions, but we're going to do our absolute best. And we might have a little bit more fun with technology in terms of how you're seeing us. So, how about we begin, Tim, with a question? Excuse me here for a minute as I shuffle papers. Sorry about that, folks. Can you I want some oohs and ahs in the comments or some thumbs up, because here we go. Are you ready for some fun technology? All of that build up. This is so silly. Here we go. Tim's center screen now. Could you provide some insight in terms of walking us through stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, what it's going to look like, and how that all works in relationship to what is expected of us come May 24th?
Well, how much time do we have? I'll do the best I can. In terms of phase 1, if we're in relationship now, as we've said, with our governor and with the director of public health, we are now, the only way we can gather when we begin May 24th, even now, is 10 or less people, and it's with a distance of 6 feet, and you're wearing a mask. So if we're talking about gathering in a church building, you see the guidelines. No Bibles, no hymnals. We're not singing. We're not doing responsive readings. I think there was one question that we had: if the preacher is preaching, does the preacher have to wear a mask because people?
Yes.
All of this gets down to say, these are the guidelines for phase 1. And so phase 1 lasts as long as phase 1 lasts. And so those, my suggestion is, and you're not asking my suggestion, you're asking about the phases, and that is, I think online worship, and if you haven't developed that yet, let's find ways to help you do that, because I think that's the only way we're going to be able to do this for an extended period of time. Now, phase 2 might come, and the church doesn't have any say-so over phase 1 or phase 2. Phase 2 comes when the curve has been flattened to the place where I think what we're saying is that the infection is down below 1 to 1, so that what we're doing is we're no longer infecting each other. And then it only goes to groups of 50.
Yeah.
So jump in. I'll stop.
So before Tim and I jumped on, we were talking about this in terms of phases, and a couple of the questions that were submitted were around wanting a timeline for the phases and having a calendar. That doesn't exist, folks. We can't tell you that come, the end of May, we're going to be at phase XYZ. That is not how the phases have been. Just like Tim was saying, the virus doesn't know a calendar, neither do the phases. So as I understand it, the phases are really coming into place as certain key indicators are happening. So as infection rates declined for 2 weeks, that's phase one. As we're able to have more testing, as we're able to do more tracing, those are all phase one things. That all continues into phase two, to the point that our hospitals are no longer operating in crisis mode. Now, before you ask me what does that mean, I don't know. I can't tell you, but that's what the guidelines say. And when I think about our hospitals operating in crisis, I haven't heard anyone say that our hospitals are quote unquote back to normal. So I'm saying that to say those are the things you're going to need to listen for as we move to phase, as we move through these phases. And Tim and I are going to do our absolute best to help you understand where we are at. And Kevin just asked, are we currently in phase one? That is a great question, Kevin. And Tim and I were discussing that before we jumped on, and we're not sure. One of the indicators that we're in phase one is that we're at that 10, no more than 10 people. But we have not been able to find anything that says we are in phase one and we have moved there. That could be because the state of Ohio is not using that same language. So we will get clarity on that, and we will share that as we are able to do that. Phase three, did you say this?
I did not get to phase three.
We don't get to phase three until there is a vaccine or until there is a treatment. That is when phase three comes. And I'll say what I said as we were getting started again. I'll say again what I said as we were getting started, that is, the medical folks are saying that's going to take us at least 12 to 18 months. So the phases are, Scott has asked the question, so phase one could last for months. Phase one will last as long as it needs to last until we get to that place where a decline is happening and those indicators are going on. Yes, it could be months. So don't think about this in terms of 2 weeks we're in phase one, 2 weeks we're in phase two, and then we're going to be in phase three. What we need you to be thinking about, and it's stated in the guidelines, is this is a long-term journey that we are on, and we're not going back to what we experienced 6 to 8 weeks ago. Anything else that we need to say about phase 1, 2, 3?
Well, not to do anything other than just a short story. My oldest granddaughter has been a freshman in high school. She now will not finish that freshman year. Well, the freshman year is over. She has been celebrating that she's now a sophomore. But I think what they've been telling the children as they move into these next years is that she may be the first class that's back to what they understand as being normal when she's a senior. So she's just now entering her sophomore year. What that's based upon is a vaccine and what's called the herd immunity, which means that the majority of the population will have been either exposed or vaccinated. And so that's even longer than 12 to 18 months. Yeah. Now the question was the first phase. First phase could be months. Second phase, the same. The third phase will come when we no longer have to worry about the virus.
Yeah. Okay, so let's do a couple that I think we can answer pretty quickly. what does this mean for Vacation Bible School and other activities within the church, including outside groups?
Are you asking me, or do you want to answer that?
Go for it.
I just think it means that you don't. This summer, particularly, no Vacation Bible School and no outside groups. I don't even want to say how that might even happen, but anybody that uses the church building, it has to be disinfected after every use. And whether that's an outside group, whether that's an inside group, whether that's a leader team, staff, if we're going to really address this, there cannot be, or should not be, Vacation Bible School, gatherings more than 10 people, closer than 6 feet, not wearing masks. It just does not make sense to do that.
So, again, we don't have a crystal ball. We're trying to help you prepare for what the reality is of what is happening. We don't anticipate that this summer we're going to be at a place that we're going to be able to gather for Vacation Bible School, for community dinners, and have outside groups inside the local church. I'll take this one, and we'll get back with you on this one. Are there recommendations somewhere for proper cleaning? You mentioned that, Tim, in terms of after every use that the building needs to be cleaned. There are recommendations on both the CDC website and the coronavirus.ohio.gov website. We'll link to those as soon as we're able to put our fingers on them. I simply didn't have enough time before we jumped on to locate those again. I have seen some recommendations. They are not recommendations for here's how you properly clean something. It's a recommendation of these are the things that you need to pay extra attention to. It's things like door handles and countertops. Think of commonly touched places. Those need extra attention, and then all the regular cleaning. So that's as simple as I can say it now. This question was asked a little bit differently. We had it asked a couple of different ways, and so I'm combining this question. When we talk about 10 people gathering, or when we get to phase 2, Tim, of 50 people are gathering, does that mean that we can have 10 people in one location in the church and 10 people in another? Or how about I give you a specific example? Could we have 10 people in the sanctuary, and if we have a balcony, have 10 on the floor and 10 more in the balcony, and then another 10 in our fellowship hall? To me, that's 30 people, but just asking.
I'm going to say it's 10 people in the building. That's the way I understand the guidelines.
Yeah.
So, in other words, we had 3 different buildings. It may work that way.
And that's not 3 different entrances, folks. And here's how I think about it. If you think about the number of people coming in, it's the number of people who, one, are going to be breathing on one another, whether you're 6 feet apart or not. It's the number of people touching door handles. It's the number of people that could use restrooms. All of those things go into that, and 10 people is 10 people. So no fuzzy math here. I think we've
I understand why we would ask the question, and I sympathize with the question. I don't empathize with it. I sympathize with it.
And if you haven't seen any of our video devotions this week, there's a difference between sympathy and empathy. I'm going to jump back to the phases. And you might say, Sarah, go ahead and answer this question, or you might want to answer it. Are the phases set by each individual church, or do we follow the guidelines given by government officials?
Well, since it's an easy answer, we follow the direction of the government officials.
So no, the local church does not determine.
Now, I think I will say this, and I can say this about our bishop and the cabinet, and that is we look very closely and listen very closely to what the governor and what Dr. Acton are saying. And I can tell you that we'll not be doing anything that gets ahead of them.
But it is so let's take that one step farther, because there were a couple of questions around at-risk groups, and one question in specific around what is the age at which we're talking about folks being at risk. I've heard two different ages being talked about, and there's not much difference between 60 and 65. Both of those ages are out there in terms of the age level that are the risk groups. That's one piece. I went down a side street here. Let me come back onto the main road and the question at hand. In terms of not getting ahead, so we're not going to move faster than the state is moving in terms of the guidelines from Dr. Acton and the governor. But if a congregation is made up of at-risk individuals, if there are reasons to take it as at a slower pace, so let's say we fast forward and we're in phase 2 and a local congregation is not yet ready for that, is that okay?
Sarah, I'm only going to say, I'm going to answer it this way. Everyone's at risk. We've got higher risk people. Some of it's age, some of it's precondition. If we're going to love one another, we're going to make our decisions based upon how we best care for the people that we're serving. Some congregations are going to have to be able to say, because of who we are and our age, it does not make sense for us to take the risk of putting everyone at risk. So there are other congregations that might be able to say, we can begin to meet with a few more people when that time comes. I think God's given all of us an opportunity to lead in a way that we've not led before, and we'll have to make the decisions as we go based upon the people God has entrusted us to care for. So let's think of it this way. You and I have done some podcasts around this. Think about not being called to preach or called to teach, but called to a group of people that you're to love and care for. And as you're thinking about those people, is it advantageous to gather them together? That's the kind of question that has to be answered. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and the thing that I would remind folks of is even within our district, there are so many different scenarios that each one of you are in and you are leading in. This is a time that I want to remind you that we need you to recognize that, yes, there are guidelines to follow, and you need to understand them, and you need to embody them, and you need to model them, and you need to refer to them, and you need to share them. And at the very same time, we need you to be thoughtful and faithful and loving. And so as you move through that, there are going to be decisions that some of you are going to have to make that you're hitting the pause button a little bit longer because it's the most loving thing to do, because you know your context. I think we've I think we've I think we've gone there.
We answered that.
I'm gonna bring Don's comment up here, and sorry, let me see if I bring it up here if it's easier to read. Maybe yes, maybe no. can we circle back to the May 24th date? Does that date have any specific meaning at this point? Sorry, Don, didn't mean to make you disappear that quickly.
So let me answer that and say May 24th is Aldersgate Sunday. It's the date in which we celebrate Wesley, and some people say it was his conversion. It's when his heart was strangely warmed. It's a date that was projected out based upon if we could actually get through a certain phase where we could be together. And that's the only reason it was there other than it's Aldersgate Sunday. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I'm not sure which it'll be. It also falls on Memorial Day weekend. Now, there are none of you, I can't say that. Most of you will not be going anywhere over Memorial Day. You're not taking a vacation. So together as United Methodists, we can celebrate on May 24th, Aldersgate Sunday. Now, we do that in our sanctuaries with 10 or less people, 6 feet apart, wearing masks, not singing, no liturgy. I mean, that's the way it happens. I'm suggesting why not have a great celebration on May 24th with your online worship and help people find ways to be the church and worship in a different way. I just don't see how the 24th will be a day in which we'll gather like we've done in times past. That's just not going to happen. Now, I don't, and that's a great question, because the feel is everything's going back after the 24th. I just understand that the governor yesterday was extending the stay at home. And we'll find out today how much longer that's going to be. And what if he says, well, we're going to stay at home until June 1st? May 24th, no, as the terms of gathering together, isn't going to be the place, isn't going to be the start time. Now, I know that sounds contradictory to what Bishop Palmer said. I think I'm speaking in a way in which he would too. That we're following the guidelines of our government, of Governor DeWine and our Dr. Acton. And we were projecting out. And in that projecting out, I think the bishop said there are more activities that go on in the church, including worship. And maybe you'd begin to prepare for some of those activities. Small groups, 10 or less people, 6 feet apart, wearing a mask. If you're in worship, we're not doing it with hymnals. We're not doing it with Bibles. So that's the best I can do with answering that question.
Kevin is saying May 29th is the new stay-at-home date. So there we go. May 29th. Since you brought up hymnals and Bibles, and can I extend that to a question that was asked about bulletins? Why can we not use bulletins? What's the thinking on that? And if we just put the bulletins out for people to pick up on their own, could we do it that way so that it's not people-to-people contact, but they're picking up a piece of paper?
Sarah's answering the question, so you don't need me to answer it. And it's all about where it's about taking away all the opportunities to share the virus. And so you can disinfect the bulletins before you ever set them out. But then somebody has to pick them up.
Wait, how do you disinfect bulletins?
I don't know.
Okay, I'm just checking. I thought you had some magic technology.
I don't know. And maybe there'll be some invention made through all of this that'll help us do that.
Yeah.
Or maybe we'll stop using printed bulletins?
So
I don't know.
May I interrupt you here for a moment because I want to add another nuance and recognition. For some of you, you don't have the technology to project. And guess what that means? If you can't do it with technology, that means that you're going to need to stay online. Think about bulletins and anything that there might be a person touching. If someone leaves that bulletin behind, it's something else that somebody else has to go back to. Okay, I'm getting some feedback that Tim, you are now echoing. So, folks, I'm going to need your help here for a moment. Tim, I don't know if you've gotten closer to your mic or not.
I'm probably just getting more passionate.
Yeah, nothing has changed on my end. So,
so I'm moving back again. So is that
let us
helpful?
know if you're still able to hear him or if not. And one of you that have my phone number want to text me, that would be wonderful. Okay. Did we answer all the questions about bulletins? Did we cover that clearly enough?
If you're asking me, yes.
Okay. Two questions around Holy Communion. One, are there additional guidelines that can be offered? And two, can we continue to celebrate communion if you already have the authority to do so? If you have a license, if you are ordained and have those privileges. Any additional guidelines?
There'll be no other guidelines. As you and I talked before we started our live broadcast here, this is a conversation that's going on across the denomination. I know some of us are reading the very comments that are going on back and forth. There are some places that say it's theologically out of line. There are other people who are saying it's not. In our conference, we have given you permission to celebrate Holy Communion online. That's not going to change. That's the word that we were using earlier was weird, in the sense that how do you use the liturgy and talk about one loaf when you've got people sitting around other places looking at a screen? So, Sarah, I think you had a way in which we could address that, just in terms of language, because language does matter. But no, there'll be no other guidelines. And yes, you have permission to continue to celebrate Holy Communion online.
Yeah, one of the conversations that I was a part of in terms of talking about how do we do this? Because celebrating Holy Communion online seems kind of weird because I have the elements in front of me, but in some instances I'm seeing people and they have different elements, and in other instances I'm not even seeing people. And so when you get to the place that you know, the words of institution and you're talking about blessing this cup and this loaf, doesn't necessarily make sense. So you might say something along the lines of, bless the elements before us. You'll find the words that are appropriate, but recognizing that it's not just what's in front of you can help. And it, just like everything else that we're doing right now, as you do it, you might do it once and go, okay, I'm not going to do it that way again. Or I'm going to invite people. Maybe you'll decide that you're only going to do, this is not a guideline. This is an idea. Let me say that clearly before I continue. You might decide we're only going to celebrate Holy Communion on Zoom because we want to be able to see one another. If that's what you decide, great, go that route and communicate that with your folks. However you do it, know that yes, you are a part of an annual conference, that yes, it is okay, and no, we are not going to be giving any more specific guidelines. Eva Marie's asking, how about a suggestion for a safest way to celebrate communion in person? I'll start, Tim, and then you can jump in. Again, we keep saying this. Right now, we're at a place you can have no more than 10 people. They need to be 6 feet apart. You can't have hymnals. You can't have a Bible. And so, in person, folks I know have asked about doing drive-in worship. What has been recommended in that instance is to bring their own elements, just like you would do online. When we get to the place that we are in phase 2, and I know that this is hard to find right now, so I recognize what I'm about to say is not possible for everyone right now, but getting the individual cups so that and we would have to think through, how are you going to pick up that cup? How are you going to get rid of that cup? And I haven't thought through all of those, but one step would be considering to have a self-contained unit for folks to be able to celebrate communion. There are some things that we're doing right now that we may have to hit the pause button on. Jim's saying prepackaged elements. So if you're not familiar with what I'm speaking of, they're help me out here. What's the word I'm looking for, Tim? They're little packages that are, I don't know, maybe an inch tall, and it kind of looks like a coffee creamer. Think of a coffee creamer package where you peel the top back, and so when you peel the top back, there's a wafer there, and then when you peel back another layer, there's grape juice underneath that. That's what is available. And even as I say that out loud, there's still challenges with that, because now you have waste that people have touched, and not only touched but have put to their mouth, and so yeah. Well,
so I think the best way to do this at this point is that people provide their own elements. You find ways in which you can bless the elements in the way that's acceptable. If there's not an acceptable way for you, I think it's proper to say we'll not be able to celebrate Holy Communion until we're able to be together. I don't think that would be out of line. And until there is a way in which someone discovers, we have before us the only way that I know that we can do it. This is a unique time. I know that when we sent out something earlier, that there was a time in the life of the church early on, in extremis. It was talking about baptism particularly. We're not talking about ordaining people to do special things or giving people special permission to do anything. This is a unique time in which we're able to say the body of Christ, the blood of Christ, and I think God's big enough to understand how we're doing it. If that's not the case, then don't. That's the best I can say.
Yeah. Okay, a couple more questions and we're going to wrap up here. I think we covered this one in terms of when we were talking about does 10 people apply to one space or multiple spaces? It's 10 people in any one building. What about hallways and aisles?
if it's 10 people and more than 2 people have to walk down the hallway, 6 feet apart, wearing masks, everything has to be clean. And please, this is not being legalistic. It's a virus does not know time or space. The virus is not saying, well, I'll jump on this one and I'll leave this one alone. Everyone's at risk. And some of us are at a higher risk than others. And I say some of us because I'm 66 years old. That puts me in a high risk area just because of my age. And most of the people that I deal with in our local churches are just about my age. Sitting in a sanctuary and walking down a hall are no different to a virus.
Right.
So that's the best way I can answer it.
I said there were only 2 more questions. There's actually 3. Recommendations on the length of the service.
Well, let me answer it this way, and that is what I've learned over the last few weeks with all of you who have been doing online worship, that the shorter worship services seem to be the ones that are connecting more.
Yeah. And go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I just, and the idea of being able to be concise in our teaching and our preaching and in the way in which we're connecting to each other may be a gift to us in the long run. So if that's what we're talking about now, if you're talking about in the sanctuary, I can't answer that. There are people who worship for an hour. There are people that worship for an hour and a half. There are people that are glad when it's over in 45 minutes. So I don't know.
And if the clock strikes noon and I'm not out the door going to have that meal, now I'm bringing up all of the things that we're not going back to anytime soon.
Well, I just know now that if it ends, that even if it ends at noon, you don't have any place to beat the Baptist to go eat. So it doesn't make any difference. I'm sorry, it's a serious question, and I'm being frivolous. I think what we do is we know our congregation, the people that have been entrusted to us, and we serve the people, the love of God, the best way we know how, in which they'll receive it.
All I will say to that is remember the medium in which you are on. And that's why I'm very conscious. We are already pushing 47 minutes of being with you, which I would say is the extreme outer limits of sitting in front of a screen and being attentive. Maybe over time we'll adapt to that attention span. I'm not sure that would be a good thing though. Could you turn off your sound on your phone? Last question here, and then we've got one more question online on Facebook here. I lost my place, folks. Love when that happens. Why not responsive readings?
Well, I think it's the same about singing, and that is that we're speaking, and when we speak, I understand that there's this is all stuff that I'm learning over the last few weeks, but there's a cone that goes out from our mouths into the room, and when we speak, all of us do that. So speaking, singing, in any way, that's what that does. So what we're doing is reducing anything that we would be sending into the air, which could be contagious.
Yeah, I'm going to switch context here, but I think it's a good example. An example that I've heard is that for folks that are runners, when you're running, when you're exercising, you are breathing harder. And so the air that you are breathing out is going to carry farther. And so they're advising runners to have a longer distance in that because of how it carries. Same thing goes for any voice projection. That's why pastors, yes, you need to wear masks, because your voice projects as well. And so the any time that we are projecting or straining ourselves as an exercise, and how many times have we have we all heard about how wonderful singing is for our body, because it does the same thing as exercise does to our bodies. The same thing is happening in terms of that, that projection of air. And so to be safe with and for others, that's
And Sarah, this would be another place to be able to say the reason we wear a mask is not to protect ourselves, but to protect the people around us. And that's another reason that I say we do this for others. And our care and love for other people, we wear the masks. Even if we know that we're not sick, we don't have the virus, whatever, it becomes a matter of courtesy and witness, because we say we care about the people around us. So that's part of that. Part of another reason for this.
right. Okay. There are a few other questions that you all have popped into the comments. Tim or I will do our best to come back and respond to those as best that we are able. You have the same guidelines as we have in front of us. I hope and pray that our conversation today has been helpful to you as you lead others in thinking through how this works with your local congregation and your local context, as we listen to our leaders in our state and our conference leaders to follow their guidance. As we have been doing these, we've closed each one of our Facebook Lives with a time of prayer. And so I want to invite any of you who have prayer requests to name those in the comments for us. You all are commenting a little bit behind as Tim and I are going to prayer. So know that as you comment, we are including your prayers as we are praying. Tim, do you want to say any last words before you pray?
Yes, and we've said this at the beginning. I want to say it now as well, and that is, we're doing this because we care for you. We were not appointed as some official group of people to respond to guidelines. We're doing it because we are have the responsibility for a district and some of you as pastors, and we're just trying to help you be the best leader you can be for this time in which we're living. So, in conversation, you've got it on tape now. But if there's a place where we need to be more clear, you need to let us know that. Am I doing okay with that, Sarah? Is that?
Yeah, and you've started to take us there, and I'll just take us back to where we began. As Tim and I have continued to talk about how can we be present to the leaders that we are responsible for in our district, as we continue to walk with you on this journey. Our commitment is to continue loving God and loving our neighbor, and to helping you to do that as well. And so that is our ultimate goal of being present with you in this format today, is to do that, to model that, to be with you in the midst of that, as we continue to journey together, as I've been saying, 2 weeks at a time. So, Tim, will you pray for us as we conclude our time together?
Sure, I'll say that all the requests that people are giving, God certainly knows whether we've voiced them or not. God knows what they are. So we'll hold those before God. God, again, for the day, for your goodness that surrounds us, for your love that never lets us go, we're grateful. and you know the very concerns of our hearts. Some are for individuals, some for the situations, circumstances in which we live. All are for your people that you have entrusted to us. We're grateful. So as we offer this time to you, and as we take next steps into an unknown time, we pray that your light shines before us, and that wherever we are, we're aware of your presence, and we're right where you want us to be. Thank you for this time as we offer ourselves to you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. We will see you either next Wednesday or next Friday. Tim and I haven't had that conversation yet. Back here on Facebook Live for another conversation. And it very well might be that we're going to have a conversation about giving yourself a gift for the future. And we'll explain more of what that means when you join us next week. So good to be with each and every one of you. Thanks for joining us. Bye for now.